In case we have never met, I'm Michael Price, and I want to help you succeed in the GSA and VA contract world.
And I'm Nancy, your co-host, and today is August 6th.
Welcome, I'm Michael Price, your host.
Imagine for a second that you are a master chef. Like you've spent a decade in the most grueling, fast-paced kitchens in the world.
Right, you've really put in the hours.
Exactly. You can perfectly sear a scallop blindfolded, your sauces are legendary, and you could run a dinner service for 500 people without even breaking a sweat.
You're a true professional.
Yeah, so you walk into a new restaurant to apply for a job, and the manager looks at your resume and says, "Sorry, we can't even let you chop an onion here. You don't have a piece of paper from a culinary school."
Which is just completely ridiculous.
Right, it sounds totally absurd, but I mean, that exact logic has been quietly running the single largest employment engine in the United States.
It really has.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are super glad you're here with us. Today, we are pulling our insights from a single highly revealing source.
Yeah, this is an August 6, 2026 report by Matt Bracken from FedScoop.
Right. And our mission today is to unpack this specific piece of legislation. It's called the Skills-Based Federal Contracting Act. Officially, that's H.R. 52335, and it is actively attempting to shatter what they call the paper ceiling in federal contracting.
The paper ceiling, I love that term. And, to really grasp the gravity of this, you have to look at the sheer scale of the U.S. federal government.
Oh, absolutely. It's massive.
Right? We are talking about the largest employer and honestly the largest purchaser of goods and services on the planet. I mean, the government spends hundreds of billions of dollars every year on contracts.
For literally everything.
Everything from IT infrastructure to logistics to healthcare administration. So when a monolithic entity of that size decides to fundamentally alter its baseline requirements.
For who is legally allowed to do the work.
Exactly. When they change that, it stops being some niche administrative update. It becomes a massive market-moving event.
It sets the standard.
It really does. The federal government sets the weather for the rest of the economy. So whatever industry you happen to work in, a shift at this level dictates how hiring, how credentialing, and, talent evaluation will be handled in the private sector for decades.
So to understand how this rewires the labor market, we first need to look at the specific mechanism this bill changes. Because up until now, the default setting for government hiring has been, incredibly rigid.
Highly rigid, yeah.
So on Thursday, August 6, 2026, this legislation cleared the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, and the core mechanic here is that it strictly blocks federal solicitations from including any minimum education standards.
Which is huge. And just to clarify, when we talk about solicitations, we are essentially talking about the government putting out a massive help wanted sign.
Right, for a specific multi-million-dollar project.
Yeah. Under this bill, when the government puts out that sign, they can no longer just casually say, everyone working on this contract must possess a bachelor's degree.
Which is a complete reversal of the historical norm.
It is a total reversal because for decades, the 4-year degree served as this kind of lazy catch-all proxy for competence.
Like an easy filter.
Exactly. If you're a government agency staring down thousands of contractor bids, requiring a bachelor's degree was just an easy filtering mechanism. It wasn't necessarily about the specific skills you learned in a university,
Right. It was a way to outsource the vetting process.
Bingo. The assumption was just that, if someone managed to navigate a 4-year institution, they possessed a baseline level of reliability.
But over time, that proxy hardened into this rigid, non-negotiable barrier.
Yeah, it became a wall.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more because looking at the fine print of H.R. 5235, there is a built-in caveat.
There's always a caveat.
Right. Education requirements can be included, but only if a contracting officer provides a specific written justification for why that exemption is necessary.
That's the key right there, written justification.
But wait, looking at how bureaucracies usually operate, what stops a contracting officer who has been doing things the exact same way for 20 years from just writing a boilerplate justification?
Like a copy-paste excuse.
Yeah, exactly. Something like, I need a degree on this contract because this is complex work. What stops that?
Well, what's fascinating here is that this goes straight to the heart of behavioral economics within a bureaucracy.
Oh, interesting. How so?
So in the context of federal procurement, time and friction are the ultimate deciding factors. Contracting officers are under immense constant pressure to get contracts out the door.
Right. They need things awarded and funded quickly.
Exactly. So they rely heavily on templates to move fast. If this bill becomes law, the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, has 180 days to issue implementation guidance.
180 days, that's light speed for the government.
It really is. And that guidance will actively instruct agencies to encourage alternatives to education requirements.
So you're basically weaponizing their own paperwork against them to force a culture change.
That is the precise mechanism at play. If the OMB removes the 4-year degree from the standard contracting template, requiring one suddenly demands extra custom paperwork.
And nobody wants to do extra paperwork.
Exactly. The contracting officer has to draft a legally defensible justification explaining why a generic degree is the only way this specific job can be accomplished.
Which I imagine opens them up to all sorts of scrutiny.
It does. It opens them up to potential protests from other contractors who bid on the project. By simply adding a layer of administrative friction, the easiest path forward for a bureaucrat is to just drop the degree requirement entirely.
So the burden of proof shifts.
Entirely. The applicant no longer has to prove why they belong in the room without a degree. Instead, the government has to prove why a degree is strictly necessary to unlock the door.
Wow. Okay, which brings us to why this became such a massive priority in the first place. I mean, this hasn't just popped up overnight.
No, not at all.
According to the FedScoop report, this has been a multi-year pet project for the bill's lead sponsor. That's GOP Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina.
Right, and it actually previously passed the House back in February.
Yeah, and the origin of this push is deeply rooted in the tech sector. Representative Mace pointed to testimony from an IBM executive who laid out just a massive operational nightmare.
Oh yeah, the IBM testimony was a huge catalyst here.
Because companies like IBM maintain these deep benches of highly qualified tech talent, but under the old rules, they are legally barred from placing incredibly skilled, self-taught individuals on technology services contracts.
Simply because they lack a 4-year degree. Think about the logistical waste that creates. You have a prime contractor with a proven expert in artificial intelligence. You know, someone who might have built critical systems in the private sector. But because of some checklist written in the 1990s, the contractor has to bench their best talent, and then they have to substitute them with someone who holds a recent BA, but perhaps has like half the actual hands-on capability.
That's crazy. And it's like finding a coder who built a revolutionary AI in their garage, but the government says, sorry, we need someone who took a 101 class 4 years ago.
It's exactly like that. The federal government is in desperate need of modernization. They are competing with Silicon Valley for top-tier talent in IT, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity.
And the traditional 4-year university system simply cannot output talent fast enough to meet that demand.
It just can't.
But wait, let me push back a little here. When we're talking about national security, like deploying AI for federal agencies or managing the cyber defenses of the electrical grid, isn't there a legitimate risk here?
A risk in removing the benchmarks?
Yeah, like we want the people guarding the digital dates to be thoroughly vetted. By dropping the degree requirement, aren't we just lowering the bar to fill seats?
Well, that assumes the degree is the mechanism providing the security, which it isn't.
Okay, fair point.
Changing the measuring stick from a credential to a competency is not lowering the bar. It is actually raising the standard of practical capability. Representative Mace framed this perfectly following the committee vote.
What did she say?
She stated, quote, skills matter, experience matters, merit matters. A piece of paper shouldn't stand in the way.
That's a strong statement.
It is, because the current system artificially shrinks the talent pool. When you restrict your hiring to only those who could afford the time and money for a 4-year university, you are inherently reducing the quality of your workforce.
Because you're ignoring brilliant minds outside that specific demographic.
Exactly. By focusing on specific demonstrable skills, the government gains access to a much wider, more capable pool of professionals. I mean, they might have gained their expertise through military service.
Oh, that's a great point. Or open source project contribution.
Right? Or intensive industry-specific certifications, which frankly are often much more rigorous than a generalized college degree.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And while the pain point really started in tech, Mace made it very clear before the House vote that this isn't isolated to IT.
No, it goes way beyond tech.
This legislation is explicitly designed to impact work across the entirety of the federal government. Logistics, human resources, administrative support, facility management.
They are taking this logic and applying it to the entire multi-billion-dollar contracting apparatus.
Which makes the political reality of this bill completely wild. I mean, if you propose removing established standards for government contracts, especially in high-stakes fields, you would normally expect a massive, highly televised partisan brawl.
Oh, absolutely. You'd expect someone to accuse the other side of either destroying standards or shutting out the working class.
Right? You would expect endless amendments, grandstanding, and, a razor-thin party line vote.
But the reality outlined by Matt Bracken in FedScoop is entirely the opposite.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee passed this 10-0 unanimous.
A 10-0 vote.
And it was so uncontroversial that during the business meeting, not a single senator even made a comment on the legislation.
That's the part that really stands out.
Yeah, we are talking about a committee with heavy hitters who rarely miss an opportunity to debate. Senators like Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, and Gary Peters, they were in attendance.
In complete silence.
Complete silence. And it mirrored the momentum in the House, where the bill was notably co-sponsored by Democrats, specifically Representative Raja Krishnamurthy of Illinois and Representative Marie Gleason Camp Perez of Washington.
Right, so it's fully bipartisan.
Exactly. And Mace, who is a Republican, leaned heavily into this dynamic. She said, quote, "This is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This is an American issue."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the silence in that committee room is the most telling part of this entire story.
How do you mean?
Well, finding a piece of significant federal workforce legislation that unites both sides of the aisle with zero debate is a statistical anomaly today.
It's basically unheard of.
Right? But it highlights a rare moment where a specific policy mechanic perfectly satisfies the distinct ideological goals of both political parties. And it all revolves around the underlying taxpayer argument.
Right. It essentially strips away the ideology.
Exactly. Think about it. If you're a fiscal conservative, you're looking at this through the lens of cutting red tape, maximizing efficiency, and stopping the government from paying artificial premiums for fancy resumes.
Makes total sense.
And if you're a progressive, you are looking at this as a way to dismantle systemic barriers, expand equitable access, and open up high-paying federal opportunities to working-class Americans who just couldn't afford crippling student debt.
So they are starting from completely different political philosophies, but arriving at the exact same conclusion.
Because both sides have to answer to the taxpayer. Taxpayers foot the bill, and they deserve the best results, regardless of a worker's pedigree. The federal government pays contractors based on specific labor categories. So a level 3 systems engineer with a mandatory master's degree costs the government a specific heavily inflated hourly rate.
So by dropping the mandate, the government introduces wider competition.
Exactly. They can secure the exact same level of technical proficiency, or honestly often a higher level, without paying the artificial credential premium.
The bipartisan consensus here is basically an acknowledgement that the old system is fundamentally misaligned with the modern workforce.
It's totally misaligned. Paying more for a contractor just because they possess a specific pedigree rather than because they are the most skilled at the task is just indefensible when you're managing public funds.
Yeah. May said another great quote in the report. She said, quote, "Washington created the paper ceiling. This bill tears it down."
It's a powerful way to frame it.
And what's fascinating is how the government is using its sheer size to enforce this reality. They aren't just passing a law saying, hey, skills are good.
Right. It's not just a suggestion.
No. They are taking the billions of dollars they spend on private contractors and saying, if you want our money, you have to hire based on skills, not degrees.
They are artificially forcing private companies to drop these requirements much faster than the free market would have done on its own.
It accelerates the timeline dramatically.
It really does. Once this becomes law, that 180-day clock for the OMB guidance starts ticking. That is an incredibly aggressive turnaround for a bureaucracy that usually measures change in decades.
It really is. It means that within roughly 6 months of enactment, every major defense contractor, tech firm, and consulting group that relies on federal dollars will have to fundamentally restructure how they write their job descriptions.
And how their HR departments filter resumes.
Wow. Okay, so bringing this all together, we've explored the core mechanics of the Skills-Based Federal Contracting Act.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. We understand how it leverages bureaucratic friction to change contracting defaults, how it stems from critical talent shortages in the tech sector, and how it managed to sail through a divided Congress by uniting both sides around taxpayer efficiency.
It's a massive shift.
So, what does this all mean for you? If you are listening to this right now, whether you are a hiring manager at a mid-sized tech firm, a contractor bidding on federal projects, or, just someone navigating your own career trajectory, this signals a massive cultural shift.
Absolutely. The U.S. government is the ultimate trendsetter.
Yeah. When the largest employer in the world officially stops defaulting to a 4-year degree as the proxy for capability, the rest of the private sector isn't just going to quietly follow suit.
No, they are going to sprint in that direction.
We are rapidly moving toward an economy where what you can do matters infinitely more than where you sat in a lecture hall.
Which leaves us with a really profound structural question about the future of education.
Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah. If the federal government successfully proves over the next few years that a bachelor's degree is no longer a strict necessity for high-level, complex, well-paying work, how does the traditional university system adapt?
That's a tough question.
If the ultimate buyer of talent, the U.S. economy, no longer demands a degree as a barrier to entry, how can universities possibly justify the ever-rising astronomical costs of traditional education over the next decade?
It is the multi-billion-dollar question for the higher education industry. Because at the end of the day, if you can step into the kitchen and cook the perfect meal, people are just going to want to eat at your restaurant. They aren't going to ask to see your culinary diploma first. Keep thinking on that and keep exploring.
If you found this video helpful, please consider donating to helpallvets.org. Thank you.
A special thank you to MarketUS.com for furnishing us this information. You can reach them at MarketUS.com or call them at 954-636-3232. Before we go, this deep dive was created by the MarketUS.com team. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It's right below the subscribe link.